please welcome to talk about the power of empathy from the digital interactive group of Booz Allen Hamilton, Sarah Weiss. Give Sarah a nice welcome to the stage here.
I never knew his name. I don't know where he lived or what he looked like, but I know what led to the most powerful decision of his life. At 9 o'clock on a Friday night, a man sat with a loaded pistol in his lap. He was in his bedroom, and it was heavy and cold, and he had a decision to make. He could raise it to his temple and pull the trigger, or he could pick up his phone that sat on a bedside stand beside him, and he could call a suicide hotline. A last grasp. When the phone rang at the hotline, my colleague answered. The man took a moment before he began speaking. I know it's difficult to begin sometimes, she said. And then she listened. She listened as he cradled the gun. She listened as he told her of his lost love, his lost job, his unpaid bills, his distant family. She listened. 24 hours later, my shift began at the hotline. I logged into the computer and I saw that I had a follow-up call to make. Now, these follow-up calls, they always made me anxious because I never knew if I was going to hear a voice at the other end of the line or if I would just be met with a deafening ring, ring, ring. But on this occasion, the man answered, and it was my turn to listen. I listened as his voice quivered and his tears fell. But to my surprise, they weren't tears of sadness, but tears of joy. I listened as he told me the story of how his ex-girlfriend had shown up at his doorstep that morning. I listened as he told me about the baby, his baby. You see, they had broken up over 9 months ago. He hadn't even known that she was pregnant. And suddenly this man felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt hope. He felt purpose. He vowed to be the best father he could possibly be for that child. All because he lived. All because she listened. For a year, I volunteered at a suicide hotline. And I know a year may not seem like a long time, but in that 250 hours of listening, I learned so much. I learned what it means to feel. I learned what it means to connect, what it means to be human. I've taken calls from a man about to commit an armed robbery of a convenience store. A woman so overweight she could not walk. A teen hearing voices. An 80-year-old cross-dresser finally ready to come out to the world. Incredible stories from people who thought they were nothing, from people who felt like they were nothing. And while we in this room, we may not have experienced any of those things firsthand, We all know what it feels like to be depressed, hurt, anxious. We all know what it feels like to be happy, giddy, peaceful. We all know what it feels like to be lost, in despair, haunted by regret. And we all know what it feels like to be loved. We all know what it feels like. As humans, we share a wide array of emotions. We all know what it feels like. That's empathy. Now, what does this have to do with digital? We live truly chaotic lives today. We feel overwhelmed at least once a day. If I asked you to raise your hand if you felt overwhelmed at least once a day, I would see a sea of hands go up. We have back-to-back conference calls and meetings all day long. We have multiple tabs open in our browsers. We have overflowing inboxes. We stay up late in bed on our phones checking email, replying to things. We text while we're driving, even though we know it's bad, even though we've promised ourselves that we'll stop. We are sacrificing our health and our safety to run this race that does not end. We derive more satisfaction from deleting an email than we do from actually connecting with another person. What's more, we may feel like we're connecting. I post a photo to Facebook and get 400 likes. But am I really connecting? Is that real? Our retweets are up, our shares are through the roof. Our web analytics tell us that we are crazy digital popular. But are these real connections? Many companies today are adopting digital with the fairly explicit objective of replacing human contact. And are we happy? The New York Times tells us that almost everyone in the United States hates their job. We're not able to be creative. We can't focus on just one thing at a time. We're not allowed to spend our precious moments cultivating relationships because we have too much stuff to do. The way we're working isn't working. Digital overload is ruling our lives. It's robbing us of the time and energy we need to bring our skills and our talents to life, to bring our skills and our talents to the world so we can help people. We are too busy to feel, and we've allowed ourselves to be like that. We've allowed that to happen. But there's hope because in a world of digital overload, empathy cuts through the clutter. So my challenge to you is to create moments of empathy in your life. Every day, at home, at work, create moments of empathy. Now, how do we do that? Because that seems like a really lofty goal. How do we free ourselves of this digital overload? How do we create the space to feel again? How do we build a culture where we can practice feeling for other people, to know what they're going through? How do we practice that? So when I first started thinking about empathy, I looked back on my 10 years of UX projects, a decade of connecting, of conversations, discussions, user interviews, usability tests. And I looked at where my connections really thrived and where they fell flat. It's a 10-year retrospective for my Agile enthusiasts out there. And what I realized is that empathy doesn't just happen. We make it happen. And if we make it happen, that must mean that we can plan for it. We can schedule it even. And I realize that there are really 3 foundational elements that we can do to make this empathy happen. And the first one is to create a non-judgmental space. The second one is to listen for feelings that drive people's actions. And the third one is to really be our customers, to walk in their shoes. So let's talk about that first one. How do we create a non-judgmental space? Now, this is a space that's open for people to share awkward things, like their feelings. And now I'm seeing some looks of disbelief here. You're probably thinking, my company, that environment is not conducive to sharing my feelings. Or maybe you're thinking, I work for the government. Try changing that. It can be done. Let me tell you about a military project I worked on. I was working for a health organization whose objective was to publish comparative statistics about different hospitals so that patients could make the most informed decisions about where to go for treatment. And we gathered members from all different service branches, and they all walked in their uniforms, and they all had very different agendas. They had very different thoughts about what this thing should look like. And we took a step back and we said, hey, today, we're not going to talk about what this website's going to look like. We're going to talk about who it's for. Let's start there. We're going to talk about what those people need. And then maybe we can talk about what it'll look like. But let's talk about the customers first. And it was not a typical meeting. We had sticky notes plastered on the walls. We had markers in all different colors, the smelly kinds, people like that. And they were scribbling ideas, they were talking, they were discussing, they were grouping things, voting on things. It was a really good environment. And then something incredible happened. This man walks over to the walls, and one of the participants, and he's looking at everything, kind of taking it all in, looking at this wall of sticky notes. And he starts to cry. And this man was a former military surgeon. He was not the crying type. But he shared a very difficult truth with us. He told us that a year prior, he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And even today, standing in that room, he wasn't sure how long he had to live. So all these statistics, all these bits of information on the wall, on these sticky notes, were things that he himself needed to know a year ago when he was selecting a doctor, when he was selecting a hospital. He wanted to know things like, will this doctor kill me? And what hospital should I trust with my life? And when the participants in that room left the session, they left not with just a list of customers and things they need. They left with an understanding of the fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty that a patient goes through when they are faced with a terminal illness and selecting a doctor. They understood what that man was going through. And it was because of that non-judgmental space that we had created that allowed that courageous man to open up and share. There's this expression, build it and they will come, and I think it applies here. If you build the space for empathy, people will open up, people will share, empathy will come. Now, the second thing we need to do, in addition to creating that space, is to listen and pay attention to feelings. Now, in UX, people always talk about you have to observe behavior. You have to observe the actions. You've got to write down exactly the path somebody took when they were trying to reach the goal page, things like that. And that's true, but I think it's a little bit more than that. I think we need to pay attention not just to the behavior, but to the feelings that drive that behavior. We need to pay attention when you're in your usability testing that you're not just scribbling down everything that the person did. You're paying attention to why. So I was working for, I was doing some usability testing for a grant funding agency, and I was talking to a bunch of scientists. And I was asking them to walk through the system where they submitted their reports to renew their grant funding. And they were clearly struggling with this system. It was taking them a long time to complete tasks. Some of them they weren't able to complete. They were feeling frustrated even though they didn't say it. And they were feeling so frustrated, I felt like they were anyway. So I finally asked, well, how does this system make you feel? And the first scientist said, this system makes me feel like I want to retire, like I don't want to do science anymore. So sad. An hour later, I was running the same test with another participant, and I asked her the same question, how does the system make you feel? She said, this system makes me feel like I want to drop a bomb on the agency. Wow. Now, were these people actually saying, I want to retire or I want to drop a bomb? No, absolutely not. But when you're observing the body language, the facial expressions, the word choices, they were actually telling me, I have reached an unprecedented level of frustration here. My frustration level is so high that I don't have the vocabulary to say that. So I reflected back and I said, wow, the system, you feel cheated and burned by this system because you enter your data and then it times you out and you lose your data. And the woman said, yes, I feel cheated and burned and livid and furious. Yes, now we're getting somewhere. Because where there is extreme emotion, there is extreme opportunity. We can now take that section that she was furious and livid about, and we can really make an impact for that scientist. So listen for feelings. Now, the third thing is to be our customers. Now, let me tell you a story about a man named Bill Winters. Bill is an EMT. He's in his mid-40s. When he was 10 years old, his father had a heart attack right in front of him. And that, he survived. But that instance really drove Bill to become the EMT that he is today. Now, Bill has 2 teenage daughters, and even though he's divorced and he only sees them on the weekends, he tries to instill that value of preparation that he learned about when he was 10 years old. He tries to instill that in them today. And so one way he does that is they have these grilling days. They always grill. He loves to grill. And they grill every Saturday afternoon, and he always follows the same process. And he tries to be as prepared as he can to show his daughters how to do it, because he figures if he's prepared in cooking and he teaches them values like that, then they'll be prepared in they'll be able to apply that to all other aspects of their life. So he picks a recipe out from this app he's got on his iPad. He cuts all the things that he needs to cut. He prepares all the marinade. He measures everything out. He then chops all the vegetables or whatever he's making. And anyway, it's this whole process for grilling, of preparation. It's kind of an interesting story. So Bill was also very influential in redesigning FirstResponder.gov. Now, there's one thing I haven't told you about Bill. He's 100% fake. I made him up. Bill is a persona. But you kind of feel like you know Bill, don't you? Even with those little details that I gave you just now, kind of feel like you know him. If I asked you about a feature on a website, on FirstResponder.gov or something like that, maybe you would, as Bill, be able to say, yeah, that would be helpful for me, or no, that wouldn't be so helpful. I had this VA client who used personas so much that they became members of our team. She felt like it made her life a lot easier because she didn't have to make the decision about what feature to put on a website with all of her organizational biases and her knowledge of organizational politics. When Dalton was making the decision, which is the name of her persona, she didn't have to make that decision anymore. Dalton did. Dalton always chose all the features that went onto the website because Dalton was a user of the website. And we talked about Dalton a lot while I worked on that project, and he became a member of our team. And at one point, there was an intern in one of our meetings, and the client said, make sure to bring Dalton to that meeting. And the intern was running all around the office trying to figure out who Dalton was and what his email address was so that she could put him on the meeting invite. Personas are real. Make them real. Make them powerful. So the moral to the story is to be your customers. So in closing, when you leave, I want you to leave with this. Empathy is a beacon in today's technology-consumed world. Without practicing empathy, we will continue to grow farther and farther apart from each other, forsaking the connections that unite us as humans. Without practicing empathy, our children, the digital natives, will believe that real connections are nothing more than likes and shares. This will change humanity. So let's plan for empathy. Let's build pockets of empathy into our day. And we can do this with 3 foundational elements. First, to create a non-judgmental space. 2, to pay attention to feelings that drive actions. And 3, to be our customers. So start today. Make a promise to yourself that at some point today you will have a conversation with someone and you will listen to more than just their words. You will listen to the feelings behind the words. Start today. If they're talking about a new project, reflect that. Say, wow, you're feeling really excited about this new project. Whatever it is, pay attention to the feelings. Let's choose to build real connections. Let's be human. Thank you.